Basketball Talk Pro. My name is Ron Ecker. I want to start by talking about our last video. I'm keeping that in the archives for a while. We have been, in the last month to 2 months, we have doubled and tripled the amount of coaches that view these videos. And that doesn't include the ones that watch it on YouTube. But there are videos where the viewership drops off, and I was disappointed that the last one, more people did not watch it. That's why I want to put it on the archives. It's kind of disrespectful when you have a man of Phil Jackson's status. I don't know why anybody would want to miss anything he has to say. And he came forth, you know, with what I thought was an excellent approach from a man that's very, very smart. You aren't ever going to match him, so you should learn from him. It would be helpful to you. And it hurts, I think, because the one thing I have wanted to do with Basketball Talk Pro, two things. One is to get coaches to understand that this is a hard working, intensive profession. And that you have to, it isn't just drills, and it isn't just offensive tactics or defensive things. It's so much more than that. First, I approached it that way because I want you to have long and vibrant careers. Not a 5-year deal or 7-year deal. I'm talking 25, 30 years of really putting everything into this profession. But a second thing is I wanted to have those kind of coaches because of the players, so that they're getting the best coaching possible, not only for their basketball career, but for their career, their personal. But to finish, you know, it's the players in the long run that get the benefit or they get the loss. Well, this video I entitled it "Strategy and Tactics" because in the survey that we did some time ago, probably a month ago, that was one of the topics that was recommended that we talk about. Personally, I kind of hung back on that because it's very difficult. Strategy and tactics are so dependent on your team and your situation that there is no general method here. It's a day by day, game by game, season by season type of an attempt. And so I was, you know, I had to think it over a little bit how much I wanted to go into it, because there really isn't that much I can give you as a general way of handling it. Let's first of all, though, let's talk about what strategy and tactics are. Strategy, first of all, is the big picture. Let's put it into terms of basketball. It would be, how are you going to prepare for your opponent one game, just one game? Or it could also be, how are you going to manage your season? Or it could be, how are you going to manage your career? That's a big part of the strategy. But I'd like to today boil it down to one game at a time. And So strategy would be what we go into that game with as far as a plan is concerned. Tactics, on the other hand, are what happens in the game. The tactics are the execution of that plan. But tactics also includes in that most plans don't work out exactly like you want them to. So during the course of the game, certain rapid adjustments have to be made. We term those tactics versus strategy. So there's two different things we're talking about. And because I want those definitions to be very clear, I've chosen two situations. One that exemplifies strategy for a game. In this case, it was a playoff series. And secondly, a tactic that took place in a critical game. The games I chose, and there's been a lot of them, you know, that I've coached in, people have done to me, I've done to them, but I stayed away from my own career, so to speak. And these are teams that I did not coach. One of the strategy part was I got from studying films. The other one, the tactic part, I got from watching a game. So let's start with strategy first of all. San Antonio versus Phoenix in the semifinals of the Western Conference, approximately 2008 or 9, somewhere in there. Phoenix had a very powerful offensive team for a couple of years there, and this was one of them. You know, they were really almost out of sight with their game average. It was 110, 111 per game for all 82 games. Pretty much a run and gun type of offense. But it's centered around two people, Steve Nash and Stoudemire. They were not a particularly big team, but they were a very good shooting team, very athletic team. The strategy that Popovich drew up for that entire series, which they won, by the way, San Antonio won, to me was a stroke of genius. But you're going to see where it was very simple, but very effective, and very well thought out. So to do that, I need to go to the whiteboard and show you their setup and what San Antonio did. First of all, Phoenix used a very simple offensive threat, but it was devastating because of the players involved. It was a simple middle of the floor, middle pick and roll with Steve Nash with the ball, Amir Stoudemire setting the pick. The formation around the outside could vary a little bit, but usually this was Marion, and he was in one corner of the other. These three players, even though they were not very mobile, there was much mobility in the offense, they still were excellent players. And so to score 110 a game, these players had to make major contributions. But then the play was simply Steve coming off. Amir could pop, because he wasn't a bad free throw line shooter, or he could roll. If Nash turned that corner, he was devastating because he could shoot the floater, pull up and shoot the jump shot, could make the layup, and could pass. You know, he was extraordinary. Amir, by going to the basket or looking for the little pop shot, was a very strong element. And those two together scored a lot of points. But these three really chipped in as well. Otherwise, they couldn't have had that much success. Well, San Antonio did this. On the Nash going and using the screen, this was Parker. Not always Parker, but probably started the game this way. When they ran it, he would fight very hard over the top, which is an unusual way of doing it for Popovich. He usually goes under. But he fought off very hard here. Duncan, the defensive player, simply dropped off back in here. You know, at that time, most people were hedging here and coming out and trying to get Nash to go over the top, which I'm glad I don't see it much anymore, and it's better for basketball. I never could understand why people were doing that. But Duncan would just drop off. And basically what he did was shadow Nash if he was turning the corner. He did not try to guard him, but he stayed away and just kind of shadowed him in here. If you know, Steve got down in here, he would just stay in here. That way he was a little bit in between Stoudemire and him, and it was difficult to make that pass. Parker then would chase him and try to get control of him again, while Duncan kind of just controlled him. Now you got to remember, Duncan could block shots. So Steve Nash was a little reluctant sometimes to take it right at the basket. He looked a lot for Stoudemire, but here was the key. They kept these three guys at home. So what they did, they narrowed the game down to a two-man play. They took the scoring opportunities away from those three players. And yes, these two, Nash and Stoudemire, scored a lot of points throughout that series and in the game. But San Antonio won the game, or the games. They won the series because they took these three players out of the mix. And they made those two players, took away the passing opportunities, so those two had to do the scoring. And they did. You know, they were excellent at doing this. But San Antonio slowed them down. Now that's what the whiteboard looks like. We'll talk a little bit more about it. Well, there's one more thing that goes into this strategy that Popovich obviously put together, and that was this. San Antonio knew that they did not have to hold Phoenix down by much. If they could bring them down into the low hundreds or even into the 90s, they would win for one reason. Phoenix, though a great offensive team, was a very poor defensive team. They gave up a lot of points. San Antonio knew that they could probably depend on scoring 105 to 106 themselves because of the poor defensive play. That's where the genius came in. Now, I'm sure as you looked at that, you thought, well, that isn't such a great thing. Well, you'd have to put yourself in the semifinals of the Western Conference before you better think you could do better. To me, this was an incredible play. Very bold move. He went against the traditional way of handling the middle pick and roll, and could have been highly criticized if it hadn't worked out and he hadn't won the series. He put himself on the line. But something else you should consider is that the hours of film work that he put in and his staff, but my guess is primarily him. I'm guessing that when he walked out of that locker room for a game, his eyes were burning from lack of sleep. The sleep deprivation was exhausting to him, and he knew, I have to bring myself up. The time and effort and sleeplessness involved in those things is awesome. Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to be that kind of a guy? You can do that right now. Prepare like that for a game. Took a long time to come up with that simple thing. And here's the other thing to remember. I don't think anybody noticed it. Nobody wrote a big article about how brilliant Popovich was. He got no credit. People didn't know. Now, other coaches knew, but his role in it was minimized. That's great strategy when the person who put it together isn't even noticed. Now, I don't know how many of you want that, because most of you are thinking, boy, if I do something great like that, people will love me, they won't notice you. Subtle, simple, great strategy. Well, let's go to tactics. This is a college game. It was the march the march of Marquette University to the finals in Al McGuire's last season at Marquette as a basketball coach. I just happened to see all those games as he marched through the tournament. Two of them were on television, but the what was called at that time the regional finals, now I think it's a Sweet 16 or something like that, was played at Oklahoma City, and I was at West Texas State University at the time. I had tickets. We stayed in the headquarters hotel, and I could go to the the practices that the teams had. So I got to see a lot of it. There was one crucial matchup that the whole college nation was watching, and that was Marquette versus Wake Forest. We had some really high-level guys in that tournament, coaches, and took a lot of the media were covering them, and McGuire himself was a flamboyant type of coach, but more quiet than some of the others. But in this particular game, and I have to tell you also that before we get started, that Marquette played in mostly low-scoring games. So every game was tight. Every game, coming down into that last 5 minutes, was a winnable or a losable game. And the other thing that as part of his overall defensive scheme, which is primarily and almost all man-to-man, but he did use a 2-1-2 zone at times when he had leads. And then he also had a couple what he called, I can't remember his term, but it was gimmicky type of defenses. I don't see much of the box and one now, but at that time other teams used the box and one. He had one oddity. He had what was called the triangle and two. Don't run out and try to do this, because you'll have problems. What he would do is put two men man-to-man on their two best players, and the three guys would play a triangle zone in the lane. Well, in this game, it was so tight, you were sitting on the edge of your seat through the whole game. I favored Marquette because I had some time with Al McGuire, and I liked what he did. But it was just so tight. Lead changes all through the thing, but just a difference of like 1, 2, or 3 points through the whole game. Finally, in the second half, towards the 5-minute mark, I'm guessing it was around the 8-minute mark. Now, Wake Forest called a timeout. When they came back on the floor, I think the score was tied at the time this happened. If it wasn't tied, Marquette was maybe behind by 1. When Wake Forest came out, they had the ball, of course, because they'd called timeout. They came down the floor, and Marquette was in their triangle and two. It stunned Wake Forest. Maybe not the coaches, but the players. They took a bad shot, missed. Marquette got the ball down because they were a terrific rebounding team. They'd come down, scored. They were up by 2. Again, Wake Forest went down without a timeout because now they didn't have many timeouts left. They came down again. They were stymied because their two best players were being, really tough guarded, and the rest did not know what to do. Another missed shot, another made shot on Marquette's end. They were up by 4. It was over. Timeout, Wake Forest. Players went back to, they were drawing up everything that they wanted them to do against the triangle and two. Wake Forest came out, came down the floor. Marquette was in a man-to-man. They had wasted 2 timeouts. And now the game was over. Because when you gave Marquette in those days that kind of lead with 5, 6, 7 minutes to go in the game, they were just too effective. And they won the critical game in their march to the championship. Now in the finals, they had 2 very big games also. But that particular move by Al McGuire, I thought, catapulted them into the finals. And though he did, he was a shrewd guy. He was very tactical. He also was very strategic. But in a game, he made a lot of tactical maneuvers that were pretty effective. So there you have 2 ways you're looking at: strategy and tactics. Now you have to remember, in tactics, yes, Al McGuire could do very wonderful things in a game. By the way, that win over Wake Forest, no one knew that Marquette had played that triangle and two. The media didn't. Again, it was a move that McGuire was not even in the picture. What he had done was not, it was not an I did it, it was the team that did it. So he got no credit. No one ever wrote about him. I'm not sure how many. I know that the Wake Forest coach knew what went on, but a lot of people didn't. You have to be prepared for that. When you make great moves, you think you're going to be a hero? No. People aren't even going to notice it if they're really great moves. And so you have to swallow your ego and look at the results instead. Remember, though, this. Strategy is hard work. Tactics is hard work. You must have your team prepared. McGuire had his team prepared to use that diamond in two for 2 possessions. That changed the whole complexity of that game. So it isn't something he just threw out there at that time. In his mind, he had it all planned that somewhere in that game, he had it ready. And he knew that it was a 2 or 3 possession risk, a terrible risk. Could have lost that game because of it if it didn't work out. So, I hope you get the gist of this. That this isn't about improving your status. This is about winning a game. And the great moves I've seen in years and years of basketball are all subtle. No one knows. No one even has an inkling because they don't understand the game like coaches do. And so you have to be someone who can see that you have a trained eye for what's going on. I hope you can learn from that. And we look forward to seeing you in another couple of days. And take a look at last video.